The ongoing clown show down at the FIA continues to reach new levels of stupidity. If you haven't already seen the news, drivers are now being threatened with huge fines, along with month-long suspensions and even loss of championship points for things like swearing and saying anything negative about the FIA. The new fines will range from £34,000 to £152,000 for Formula 1 drivers. Drivers of other categories will be fined less because it is related to pay, so the Formula 1 drivers have the highest fines and other drivers have much lower fines, which does make sense, but it means that F1 drivers now have some astronomical fines. And I think this may be the final nail in the coffin to make Formula 1 distance itself entirely from the FIA. Since Charlie Whiting passed away back in 2019, the FIA seems to be getting worse and worse by the day. Now, of course, there has always been tension between the FIA and Formula 1, much like there is in any sport between the sport and its governing body, but it just seems now that Formula 1 and the FIA want completely different things for the sport. Since Drive to Survive came out a few years ago, the popularity of the sport has skyrocketed. And this is in no small part due to the drivers and the team principals being able to express their personality. Before Drive to Survive came out, it feels like we didn't know that much about the drivers, whereas now we know a lot about their personal lives. And honestly, I love that. I love getting to know the sports people I'm watching because they are people, and sport is about personalities and personal struggles and all these things that make a sport great. Otherwise, you may as well paint all the cars the same, have them numbered 1 to 20, and who cares who wins? You want your favourite driver to win because you like your favourite driver, otherwise, what are we here for? And just think about the two biggest stars to come out of Drive to Survive. You've got Daniel Ricciardo, who said that Netflix were a bunch of and then you've got Gunther Steiner, who became an overnight celebrity because of quotes like, "You don't fuck smash my door," and "Now we look like a bunch of wankers." So how can we have a TV documentary series where the drivers get to express themselves and speak the way they want to speak, but then when they're in the paddock, they're robots who can't express any sort of personality? Can you imagine Max Verstappen being interviewed and he gives those really annoying one-word answers like he was before, when the journalist just couldn't get anything out of him? He's like, "Yes, no, I am talking." But now imagine that all 20 drivers are doing that and the press conferences just cease to exist. And the drivers have been really outspoken about the way they feel about the FIA too. Like last year when the FIA were trying to ban jewellery, so Lewis Hamilton rocked up wearing more money than I'll ever see in my entire life. Or when Sebastian Vettel took to wearing his underpants on the outside of his race suit as a rebellion against the FIA's attempt to control every aspect of the drivers' lives. But the question now is, how are the drivers going to respond to this? Because I certainly cannot imagine that they're going to take any of this. Not so long ago, in November of last year, the GPDA, the Grand Prix Drivers Association, they put out a very public statement against the FIA, even going so far as to say that Mohammed Ben Sulayem should consider his tone and language when speaking to drivers. So I can't imagine that these new rules will be met with anything different. In the message, they also seek some clarification on where all the money generated from fines was being spent, because the FIA is supposed to be a non-profit organisation. But is someone profiting here? The drivers can be fined for various different indiscretions, some small, some big. These include things like speeding in the pit lane during a practice session or walking across a live track like Lewis Hamilton did a few years ago. And in some cases, these fines are tens of thousands of pounds. So where's all this money going? The drivers have also been outspoken about the fact that they don't like these monetary fines because it sets a negative image for the sport. But if someone was taking tens of thousands of pounds over me, I probably wouldn't like it either. And it also feels like there's more fines in Formula 1 now than we've ever seen throughout the history of the sport. So you've got drivers being fined more often, you've got new rules that lead to drivers being fined more often, which leads to more questions about where this money is being spent. As for the swearing, I really don't understand the issue with it. I mean, we all swear. I'm sure that everyone watching this video has sworn at some point in their life. And let's not forget the environment that these drivers are in. I mean, the adrenaline they must be feeling is something I can't even imagine. And like Sebastian Vettel said a few years ago, do you really think that if you put a microphone up to a footballer's mouth that everything he says is going to be something nice? Probably not. Formula 1 drivers have never not got a microphone in their mouth, even when they're in the car speaking with their engineers, conversations that we shouldn't really even see sometimes. On top of that, it's somebody's job to decide what goes out to the public, so if you're really that concerned about it, maybe just don't show as much of it on the TV if you don't want. Particularly when the drivers are in the car, they're literally laying their life on the line for our entertainment, and you get mad at them for swearing. I just don't understand it. Not too long ago, the FIA were trying to clamp down on drivers making any sort of statement that violates the neutrality status of the FIA. Quote, "The general making and display of political, religious, or personal statements or comments notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality promoted by the FIA under its statuses, unless previously approved in writing by the FIA for international competitions or by the relevant ASN for national competitions within their jurisdiction," whatever that means. And again, this does seem to be an attack on certain drivers, much like with the jewellery and the swearing from before, when you had Mohammed Ben Sulayem saying that these are Formula One drivers and not rappers, which Lewis Hamilton was very outspoken about, had some definite racist connotations to. And I do understand why you might think that Formula One isn't a political landscape and maybe isn't the right platform to share these views. But how far does that go? If Lewis Hamilton puts something up on Instagram about some social injustice in the world, is the FIA going to fine him for that? Or is it just when he's in the paddock? Or like, where do we draw the line? Also, the irony of saying that drivers can't make political, religious, or personal statements in and of itself seems to be a very politically motivated statement. Like it or not, almost everything we do is political. From the countries that we choose to race in, the sponsors that we allow to sponsor the sport, and even the drivers that come into the sport, everything is political. And if you can't make religious statements, what are we going to do when we race at Silverstone? Because the British national anthem, literally the first line says, "God save the King." Are we able to say that anymore, or do we not play the anthem? But there's nowhere that the FIA would say that we can't play that anthem. But then if someone was to wear a Christian cross necklace, would that be allowed? Because that's a religious statement. But where do we draw the line? It's so vague. It's so stupid. I just do not understand it. And Lewis Hamilton is Sir Lewis Hamilton. Are we allowed to say Sir Lewis Hamilton in the paddock anymore? Because you could argue that that has some religious and political aspects to it too. But ultimately, what I really don't understand is any of the motivation that the FIA has for doing this. The FIA is there to make motorsport in any category the safest that it can be. But in recent years, it seems like it's trying to become this like mini dictatorship over the sport. Shouldn't the FIA be focusing on far more important things in the sport and in all motorsports rather than trying to control little aspects of the drivers' lives? In reality, I don't know how realistic it is to separate Formula One from the FIA. As much as I would love to see that, I don't know how simple a transition that would be. I assume there's probably contracts in place between the FIA and Formula One that maybe can't be broken, or there'd be huge financial consequences if they were. And honestly, I don't know if some of these are just empty threats from the FIA. I mean, can you seriously imagine a driver being banned or losing championship points because of something they said? Can you imagine the controversy that that could lead to? Like, imagine you're going into the final race of the year and you've got two drivers equal on points like you did in 2021. And then going into turn one driver pushes the other off track and then the other driver swears on the radio. And then that driver gets disqualified from the race and the other driver wins the championship because something as trivial as swearing at another driver. So honestly, I hope that the FIA goes back on this because I think this is so insulting to the drivers as people. And like I said, they're there for our entertainment. They're risking their lives for something that we love to watch. And I do imagine that if a driver were to get a month-long suspension or a race ban or loss of championship points, whatever it may be, I would love it if the whole GPDA got together and went on strike and just decided, like, okay, we're not going to race this weekend because if you're going to try and control us that way, then we're not going to race for you. The FIA do really need to tread carefully here because most of the money that the FIA gets is from Formula One and that's how it's able to run the other motorsports. So if Formula One do decide to leave or stop paying the FIA for whatever reason, then that could be the end of the FIA. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. I'm a bit annoyed by all this, to be honest. Like I said earlier, it just seems like the FIA is just doing stupid decision after stupid decision after stupid decision. This was video number 11 on the channel, so thank you so much for watching. We've just hit 1,070 subscribers, so thank you so much to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.